And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Rod Honeycutt, who during his near-death experience got answers to his spiritual questions, which today we're going to learn about. Rod, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Rod, if you don't mind, let's just start on the day that your NDE happened and go from there.
Okay. That was about 25 years ago, roughly. It started out as any normal day, as they always do. You don't wake up and think, well, this is going to be the day I go over. But I've been feeling kind of flu-like and under the weather. It was the weather had been changing. I was in between. My girlfriend and I were in between apartments, and so I had swung by my sister's house, and while I was there, I just went into the medicine cabinet and found some old cough syrup. There's some prescription cough syrup. And I said, oh, I'll just take this because I just don't have time to go to the doctor. Anyway, I take that bottle of cough syrup and took it home. Didn't realize it had codeine in it. Took a swig of that and almost instantly just boom, went into anaphylactic shock and just totally just right there on the living room floor. Did not realize I had an allergic reaction to codeine or whatever. I had never had that much codeine at once. So that's what happened. I basically had an allergic reaction to codeine. Left my body. The strange thing is this time, obviously, the first thing you realize is there's no time. So while I feel like by the time the ambulance, the paramedic people got there, I'd already kind of returned to my body in a certain way. There's a point of me that still remembers standing there looking at that. Not standing, but kind of being just in the room. That's the most profound thing about leaving your body is when you see it in 3 dimensions, if that makes sense. It's something that you don't, it's something that you just don't get to do. It's not the same as seeing as on a photograph or like I'm looking at right now. I'm seeing myself on a Zoom. But when you see yourself in 3 dimensions and you can actually see yourself from any side that you want to, merely by just kind of conceiving that, it's just very curious to the mind. It's a lot, I guess it would be a lot like when you hear the astronauts and people who leave the Earth, when they leave this Earth and they say they have this spiritual understanding of this, something about their connectivity to the Earth and the fragileness of the Earth. You hear about them talk about this. You hear about William Shatner talking about it when he went. It's the same thing when you cross over. You have this understanding and this okayness with everything, how everything works. And for me, it wasn't anything profound. Like I didn't go through any super big tunnel or anything. I realized that I'd crossed over. I saw myself on the ground. I said, look at you, you idiot. You accidentally killed yourself. You done killed yourself. And now here you are. Now what do you do? And the minute that I realized that I was no longer in my body is when I went to like another place. And the other place was kind of like a waiting room, so to speak, where I was met with, voices that I couldn't quite hear, but voices that I was understanding, but didn't see anybody's face. But I knew where it was. For some reason, I felt like I was comfortable enough with this is what happens. I had no, I was raised basically a Southern Baptist, in the South, grew up in the Carolinas. But I wasn't really ever committed to any sort of religion or anything. So I didn't have any super preconceived notions. So I didn't see a Jesus figure or any sort of specific thing. And I didn't feel like I had to go through a tunnel to get where I needed to get. In other words, I could just think it and be there. So I remember it was funny when I was looking down at myself and I was like, I need to go and see what the rest of this afterlife is like. And I remember trying to go for the door or the window, feeling like I needed to go through a portal when I didn't. So that was it. That's how I left. And, I don't really even know how long I was gone. We've added it all up and played it back. It could have been more than a minute or two, just a couple of minutes. But the thing is, there's no time. So you can, if you have all the questions you want, there's plenty of time to get those questions answered. And you can, if you do, I suppose, choose to come back with so much understanding of things. And I feel like that's what I came back with. So much so that I came back with too much. And I've been getting downloads ever since.
Now, while you were there, did you feel worried or scared, or did you feel really calm and peaceful?
Calm and peaceful. Like I kind of knew this going in. I had always kind of had a hunch in my heart that that we don't really die in the way the Christian, the biblical sense, the way it is, or any things that we were told, and that we do kind of go on. I felt like I was, first of all, I was relieved to go, okay, this is how it played out. But also there was a real sense of knowing that already. Like I knew in my DNA. I read a lot of NDE stories, and if you see them posted in different blogs, and of course, like the Eins website has thousands of them, you'll see certain people will talk very in depth about their journey from their body into that realm. Like, I went through a long tunnel. Some people say they went over the ocean or into the sun. There's a very much description of that. To me, it was just like, I was like teleported the minute I was Star Trek. The minute I decided I was on the planet this, I was on the planet this. Or the minute it was just, for some reason, it was like they were speeding me up through that because they knew I was going to have lots of questions. I guess, I don't know. I felt like I knew I was there for a lot of cramming, a lot of information. That was going to be part of what I was supposed to come back.
Being separate from your body, did you feel like you encompassed all this space, like you were a cloud?
Cloud, interesting. That's an interesting thought. I have never thought of that. No, but I did get a connected sense of one of everything. Like, I felt like I was separate from that entity I saw there on the ground, my body, but I was still it. And I also I felt a connectivity to everybody in the room in a strange way, because I had no clue who the paramedics were. So in that regard, yes. And so, like I said, there's a very fine line between physicality and what's not. So if you got to think, when our senses cross over, what we can see and what we can hear, that synesthesia thing, that, I guess those levers are very, very thin when you're crossing across those lines like that. And now that I've gone over and seen that, I can see that. I really do believe that we as people sometimes come over and we kind of, we jump parallel timelines in a way through a near-death experience. Someone will come and have a near-death experience, particularly if they have one with a head injury. They will come back and they will be like a totally different person, like a walk-in soul type concept. I feel like that we do these types of things, like walk-in souls, or our own soul will jump over from another timeline to kind of error correct things. So I do feel like that sometimes when we have a near-death experience, we're feeling everything that's around us, but we're also feeling all of our previous and post lifetimes, because we're living those lifetimes all simultaneously because of the no time concept.
Before you came back is when you were asking all those questions, right?
Yeah, like, why do we come to an Earth, and why is there physicality in the first place? Well, all the questions that everybody who says, if I ever had a near-death experience, this is my bucket list question. I had them all, because nothing could convince me that this was really happening to me. I so did not want it to be happening to me, because my ego is so huge, I couldn't handle it. So if I had just made it up in my mind, I would just hallucinated the whole thing. That was a whole lot easier for me than changing my life and writing a book about it, and exposing myself to possible ridicule. Because, like I said, 25 years ago, there weren't that many books out on this topic of NDEs. Now there's so much about it, and it's become a little more whatever. So, my thing is, the fact that I didn't answer my calling during my NDE, that's where I really, things went awry for me life-wise. And so it wasn't until I finally got back on track. And so I feel like I've come into my life and error corrected several times now to get me to where I needed to be in order for everything to function correctly. So, yeah, so that I was a difficult student, I guess you could say I am.
You mentioned that you had not found your calling before or during your NDE. I'm assuming you found it now. So what is it?
Well, it was revealed to me in the EDE, and it was like, you're going to be a harbinger. You're going to explain these things to people, and you're going to make these concepts that are very esoteric, very palatable, and you're going to be the layman guy. You know what I'm saying? The guy who can do the side back, can say, this is how it works like this. And I'll use some sort of analogy that people can grasp. And that was my calling. But when I got back, from the other side, first of all, you don't want to be here. I didn't want to come back like everybody else. They had to convince me to come back. They being like a council, I guess, of elders. It's a they, but you don't even know how many they are. You just feel there's a presence of them.
Do you see them?
No, I didn't. I could just feel them. Didn't have to see them. I felt like it was one of those things where I didn't need to see certain energies manifested in a way that would make it feasible for me. Like I didn't need to see a Jesus face or a face of whatever. That energy was not wasted. We spent that time and that energy on other things, like you know, me understanding how cosmic and how things are so intertwined. Like I said, you're like, well, if you left your body and you're in the room with them and suddenly you just blink your eye and think you want to be in heaven or wherever, some other place, and you're there, where did you really go? Did you go anywhere, or are you just in that space in between, in that room, in those molecules? There's a million different ways you can extrapolate a physical and a scientific answer for something that's way more esoteric. Like when I said walk-in souls. Well, people say walk-in souls. So what you're trying to say is it's a very strange concept that somebody makes a contract with another soul, comes in, sits down, says, I'll now become this person. And this person takes different traits. They come back, whatever. That's documented, but just not documented as a walk-in soul. It's documented as dissociative amnesia. It's a side effect of PTSD. Happens in lots of times in automobile traumas. So these people have head trauma, go into a coma, come back, rehabilitative life, have to learn to, do things again from a long road back from recovery. And then suddenly they're a different person. The things that they used to care about, they don't care about anymore. That's a scientific answer for something that really is kind of an answer for something that we really don't have an answer for spiritually, because we can't freely talk about walk-on souls or soul contracts or things like that. These are the things that I asked about over there. And these are the things that I still get downloads on all these years later, because these things keep popping up in my life, and the more I start talking about it and being open about my NDE, because I kept that stuff quiet for 20 years. It wasn't until I went to this IONS conference I told you about that I kind of just became okay with talking about it, So, when you get a calling from the universe will tap you on the shoulder, and you say, well, I'm looking for a sign. Well, if that doesn't work, the universe will smack you in the side of the face, it'll still tap you a little bit harder. It's that meme where you say, well, thank God I need a sign. And then the universe sends you a sign. And you think, well, I think I'll wait for a sign of your sign. Maybe that wasn't the right sign. You're always second guessing yourself with your ego. And I'd let my ego suck myself out of that. And for years, and to the point where I became a non-productive person. It was just had to walk away from society because I had nothing left to give to it anymore. And then that's when I went off on my own and did my own little time off grid. And that's when I met myself. Yeah.
Can you share with us some of the questions and answers that you got on the other side?
Well, yeah. I mean, do you have some questions?
What's the point of coming to Earth in the first place?
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. People think of it as a school and a place to experience, but to learn and whatever. And it's a bit of both. The whole reason was because if you want to look at some lump, and this is where you have to actually think of something, some sort of creation spark. You can't go with complete, this is a biological happenstance of this thing we've created, that something somewhere had to engineer this something or whatever you want to call it. The universe, you want to call it God, you want to call it a superior intelligence, whatever you want to call it. It knew everything by just being itself, but the only thing that it didn't know was how to experience. So in order for anything to experience itself in an ultimate situation, it has to put itself into a relative situation in order to experience itself. In other words, it has to become not what it is in order to turn around and look at itself. So in a nutshell, any sort of physical world, because this is obviously not the only one, was created just so creator, or whatever you want to call it, wanted to be able to step back and look at itself in all its beauty, because that's really all it can't do. is experience. So everything that we do, every thought that we ever have, every emotion we ever have is just an experience that we are living by playing a role for the completeness of everything so that it can experience. And that doesn't sit well with a lot of people because they're like, well, I don't want to come here and do all that just so that something can experience it, just so it can, have a record of it. But no, that is exactly. And believe me, you on some level, you agreed to do this. We all did, or we wouldn't be here.
What about reincarnation? Do we keep coming back over and over again?
Some of us do. Yeah. Yeah. It's all up to us. A lot of us come back because we want to steer the world in a certain direction. I'm a big believer in the thought that maybe anywhere from 20 to 25% of the Earth's population at any given time is completely conscious of what's going on. So I hate to say it, but most of the people who are walking around basically caught up in their own life, or to the point where they don't really understand the inner workings of things, basically they were more of a background and support. Does that make sense? If you're going to have a biological situation where you've got things living on it, you have got to be able to have a support system for it. So if 80% of us were all running around completely enlightened, there would be no reason, I'm saying, we're just not at that point here on an evolutionary level where we're communicating without speaking and things like that. We have not just reached that point yet. But the reason we haven't is because we're experiencing the ride along the way. And that's the thing. We always want to think of everything as a destination, because you're going to eventually get to this. You're going to get to die. You're going to get to heaven. You're going to visit. You're going to spend eternal. We're just hit with all these, finality type words. And so we're so concerned about that. We're like, we got to get to that heaven. You know what I'm saying? We race through life thinking, well, the payoff is better, and what happens when you get over there? Can I go back? Can I go back? I want to go back. I didn't do this. I want to learn about this. It's fun. It's fun. And then this is where people come at me and they're going, no, it's not. My mother has cancer. This is that. Life is not fun. It is. It is. And on some level, I promise you chose to come here. And the minute you cross over is going to be the moment you realize that, damn, I knew I was supposed to do something over there. Yeah. So that's why I try to preach that. If anything, I don't try to preach anything, but I just try to say, hey, that's what I'm taking from there. Everything is different. Everyone's truth is different. That's why there's no two NDEs that are the same.
Is there a heaven and a hell on the other side?
Well, it's a state of being. Heaven is a state of being, not a place. And there is no hell other than not knowing that state of being is what happens. That Christ that you hear that is so common in the New Testament, the Christ-like, the Christness. It's just Christ consciousness. And the knowledge of that is everything. There's millions of levels and in between that. I'm just literally hitting on the most broad aspects of it, but there's no hell as we know it. There's no place. There's no separation. That's just the opposite. When you separate from your bodies, when you realize that you're connected to everything else. Yeah, that the body was the umbilical, not the cord. You know what I'm saying? So the body was actually. That makes sense. It's pretty deep. I know. It's like, it's so simple. It was like, well, how can it be so simple? But if you tried to look at it in terms of audio, okay, if a person is living one existence here and they decide that for whatever reason there's been some sort of a glitch or something, or for whatever reason this is just there's an opportunity for them to come in and change reels, so to speak. It's like audio error correction, where when there's a dropout in the audio and the digital signal gets bad, it just moves over to the next line of error, next line of ones and zeros to error correct and fill in the gaps there. That's basically, it's gene splicing, I guess you would say, or time splicing, something like that. It's really Orwellian, and it's really Back to the Future. You have to think about it in that regard, But here right now, we're getting so close to what we're about to learn about some of these new things like gravitational things and whatever. We're about to really get to a place, I think, in the next 15 or 20 years, where the thoughts of going billions of miles could be feasible. So I think a lot of our thoughts are going to change about what's cosmic and what's where heaven and hell could be, because if heaven and hell have to be in a place, well, they've got to be beyond this universe. And God knows we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of how big that is. So if I would say, where is heaven? Where is hell? Well, where would you put them?
What did you learn about dreams on the other side? Like, where do we go when we're dreaming?
Wow. Okay. That's an interesting concept, because that's something that was one of my questions, because I've heard different philosophies about having out of body experiences and transcendental meditation. And some people say that leaving your body when you're consciously awake is a good thing. Other people say it's a bad thing. And so that was one of the things I thought of. What are dreams? Or more so, what do we do when we are not conscious? What happens? So I saw things, and I'd say the closest description I've read to that would probably be in the Conversations with God books. We know Donald Walsh. He talked. There's a couple of chapters where he talks about what happens to the body when you fall asleep, and basically, it's the fact is the soul envelops the body, and so when the body shuts itself off and goes completely unconscious, the soul is free to leave the body, and does so every night. That's basically what sleep is. It's the soul's arrangement with the body in order to rejuvenate and rest. So the soul flies off and bounces around and experiences all kinds of things and brings things back. So what your dreams are a combination of real experiences that you're probably experiencing on other timelines that are very close to yours. If you've ever experienced a dream that just seems so real, it just seems so mundane, but there's just one thing that's different, maybe one person or one character is wrong, but other than that, it's just like a dream about your ordinary life. That kind of a thing. Deja vu to the point of where you're actually teaching yourself to pull yourself out of dreams. I have like really lucid, vivid dreams, and so I can actually jump into dreams. I'll have those dreams over and over and over again. I've literally learned to jump into my dreams from a deja vu standpoint and jump into the frame and literally move something so that I can send myself a signal knowing that I've been there before. Yeah, I know. That's crazy.
What was the most surprising answer to a question that you got?
Probably the we are one, the whole thing that we are creation. We're just a little sliver of that, a little cell of it, if you will, that's going through the ether, through the plasma, kind of, if you will. If you take the human body and cells and blood and everything, and you pull back from that, you see that it's a microcosm for everything. And that was it. When I could look down to the smallest little flower and then pull back and look at the largest city on the earth and see that they're the exact same thing down to the DNA, you realize that, whoa, that was the most surprising to me, because I would never have thought or felt or experienced such oneness. That was the one true love experience that I feel like so many people talk about, when you just feel like it's a part knowing. Yeah. Very profound.
After your NDE, did you come back with any abilities that you didn't have prior?
Yeah. I had no sort of sensitive. I had no sensitivities that I know of before that. They say you're born with it, and then just through certain whatever things that happen in your life, it may come out. But I remember when I was a child, very young, I did hallucinate. I saw what I thought was wolves, German Shepherd dogs. Turns out I was seeing wolves, spirit animal wolves. But that went away like most kids, when you're about 6 or 7, so, that doesn't follow you. And after the near-death experience, I started becoming empathetic. I started feeling other people's thoughts. I've always been a musician and stuff, but the way I heard music and things like that were different. I started to have a little bit of synesthesia where when I heard sounds and tones of music, especially distorted tones like electric guitars and violins and things like that that have lots of grain in them, I would hear them as colors, warm, brown, autumn. And so I would have these crossing over of things like that. And that's just gotten stronger and stronger and stronger over the years. To the point now where I have some clairvoyance now, some mediumship abilities here and there. It's not like I can pick and choose it, but I'll get downloads a lot, and so yeah, it's been a reoccurring thing. So yeah, I've definitely, and the thing is, when you change your lifestyle and you start saying, oh my gosh, I sense a difference here. Well, I'm going to not drink alcohol anymore, or I'm going to cut out this, or I'm going to cut out. Once you start cutting other things out of your life that also kept you from being so focused on your spirituality, you start to realize that you resonate with things a lot more. So a lot of it is my own tuning of my own, my own doing, but I do think a lot of it were things that I just, I just didn't have the sensitivities before, and it's probably because I didn't know how to handle them. It's like, I guess, see, I think what's coming to my mind is like a voice is right telling me like, yeah, kids with matches, like I had to get to a certain level in my life to where I could realize these gifts for what they are and use them for what they are. Otherwise, I guess I would have not a good steward of them, maybe.
How did you get involved with ions after this experience?
When I was first prompted by this voice in my head, you're going to write books, that's the first thing as I started doing was researching who had books out on near-death experiences. And there were a few, Betty Eadie's book was pretty big at the time. Dr. Eben Alexander's book was out. Lisa Gar's book, I think, had just come out too. And so a lot of these big books were coming out. And so I started doing research, and I started, and I found Eins through that, and I always just kind of followed them through the years. When it became big on the internet, people started putting their stories on there. And that was always my go-to for people. I was like, if you ever want to get inspired, just go to the Eins website, because they've got literally thousands of stories of just amazing, and so I've always, so I'd always wanted to go to a conference and, maybe check it out, but I never had the time or the money or whatever, and they only do them once a year. And so I'm out here on my sabbatical living off grid, and I just happened to be looking for some pickup work, and audio, video. And I do a lot of that corporate stuff, loading and unloading trucks and things like that. And so they said, hey, got this corporate video gig for you. You want to come in and run some camera and sound, for this conference? It turns out to be the Eins conference, the annual conference 2017 in Westminster, outside of Denver, Colorado. So I got a chance to meet all these people that I've been talking to for years online, like, Lisa Gar. And so it was really cool. That's when I had another out-of-body experience then, was at the Eins conference there. So that one of those, what I call those error corrections, where I had to come in and fix things weren't going in the right direction.
Can you tell us about that experience at Eins?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was the craziest experience I've probably ever had, because when you get that many people together in a single facility that you got people who are mediums, you have people who have all these clairvoyant things, some of these people can't wear watches, and so you get that much energy around, and it's profound things happen. And so I had a lot of technical issues for this show. It was one of the worst shows ever, technical wise. But that was the universal gremlins going, see, Rod, this is how we're showing you that the energy is more powerful than what you can profoundly understand. And so throughout the weekend, I would have all these horrible things go wrong with the audio or video or something. We had a bunch of gear go down, and we ended up losing a video guy. And I'd spend all the hours in between the conference fixing this crap so that we could get through another day. So by the time we got to the very last day on Sunday morning, I've been up for like 4 days straight fixing all this gear. So I'm standing there that morning, standing at the soundboard, listening to them have a conference. And I just start to kind of fall asleep, because I've been up for 4 freaking days, and I'm just, Yeah, I'm about to pause. And next thing I know, I just lift right out of my body and I go straight up to the ceiling. And I'm looking down at me, running sound, and I'm looking at, the speaker on stage speaking, and I'm looking down at all the audience. And so I have this total out of body experience. And I just kind of flitted around in the whole main conference room there for a couple of minutes, and then just right back into it, just in time for questions. Hey, we'll take some questions. So yeah, I had a total out of body experience at an EINS conference and had so many other questions that I had answered about time travel, walk on souls, and soul contracts and soul packs. And since then I've got a lot of information and downloads about how that sort of stuff works.
Are you saying time travel for us on the other side, or time travel here in the 3D world?
Here, both. Because if you're traveling in the other world and anything that can happen there can happen here too, if you think about it. You know what I'm saying? It just hasn't happened yet because of that whole time space continuum. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if you think in that regards, yeah. So it is in a way it's time. Is it time, or is it just bumping over one timeline over? You know what I'm saying? Just a couple of nanoseconds or milliseconds, because everyone's living their own timeline. So if they're adjusting their own timeline, this is how I think the universe corrects itself for little universal hiccups. When people say, well, God answers certain prayers, or he doesn't answer this, or he doesn't answer that, it's like, well, it's because the universe has a system of checks and balances. You know what I'm saying? And that's so that the accidents that happen were supposed to happen, and the accidents that weren't supposed to happen get diverted or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Those little universal checks and balances. And I think I think that we have all kinds of arrangements that we make before we come here. Sometimes we come here as one soul, one soul entity in one human body, and that soul splits at 2 years old, 3 years old into two other bodies, three other bodies, and lives lives like that until they come back and meet somehow. So they have some sort of a passkey system that allows 2 or 3 of them to have to actually connect in order for them to cross back over. That way they don't waste a lifetime by creating a failsafe. I see all kinds of these types of arrangements happening. Yeah. And what these are error corrections. These are the universe's way of fixing things, which if you think about it is a much more systematic way of answering prayers than somebody up there, reading prayers in an inbox going, okay, it's a different kind of a thing. It's very cosmic. What I'm trying to explain, and I can't put it into words because I just can't, is it's all way more cosmic than we think it is. And once we understand the science of the cosmics of that, we're really going to jump up with our, consciousness level. We're on that plane right now. That's why there's so many people coming out talking about this stuff. We're on the cusp of a big ascension. And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with some things we're about to discover with gravity.
How much of our lives do you believe is free will, and how much of it has already been decided through soul contracts?
I think it depends on the life, in the incarnation we take here. Some are more so than others. But I think we totally have free will for everything except for pretty much, I think we predetermine our birth parents, and we predetermine our race and our general socioeconomic situation. We have to predetermine that because otherwise we have to have a way of getting in. I'm saying it's all about having that physical portal, that way of making physicality out of something that's not physical. So we have to have a way of busting through. So what do? We bust through parents. So we have to choose that. We have to choose those, right? Okay. So, but as far as when we die, how we die, and what we accomplish in between there, I think that is really up to what we really want to try to accomplish. Some people will come here with a very, very specific task, and it may take them a gazillion tries to do that. You know what I'm saying? Others will come here to help someone else learn. You know what I'm saying? We'll have different agendas every time we come here. And when I say by coming here, I'm saying coming to any sort of physical realm or any sort of physical world, because we're just like one minute little thing of all the possible diversions of biological entities and life out there. It's unfathomable of what's there. So yeah.
Did you ask about angels or the devil or Jesus or anything like that?
Yes, I did. And all these historical figures that we talk about, like Jesus and whatever, they did exist, and they've been the mythological aspect of them has changed what we think about them so much that it doesn't closely resemble what they stood for originally. But those creatures were, I mean, those people were real. Angels, yes, definitely exist in a form like we think of the spirit guides or whatever. You know, there's a hierarchical council of elders. I think of the Many Lives, Many Masters book series that come to mind. By Dr. Brian Weiss, talks about, you know, the council of elders. So when you think, a lot of times people could think of angels as maybe this councils of elders. But as far as Satan, demons, there's nothing, because there's only love. There's just one emotion of love. That's all there is over there, so to speak. The negativity, the idea of sin or fallacy or harm or anything that's not love was invented in a physical world, because we have to have that in order to step away from it. See what I'm saying? That's it. Remember, the whole reason that entity came and created some sort of a world was because it could only know how beautiful it was. It couldn't step away from itself and see itself in the mirror. See, so every one of us, we're all playing a great role by letting this God entity, universe, creation, source, whatever you want to call it, experience through us.
Did you ask about ghosts?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's people who live in a very we have different levels of physicality. So we have different levels of attachment to Earth depending on where we are when we cross. There are people who literally have crossed over who just don't know that they are gone. It's very much the Bruce Willis, you know, the Sixth Sense kind of the thing. They don't know they're gone, or they just don't want to let go of certain things. And they don't realize how the timelines work, you know. And so they're just allowed to just mingle around and do what they want on their own, because they're kind of in between dimensions. So, you know, they're here, they're around us. And the people who see shadow people can see them all the time. And I will tell you from experience, from living off grid, if you go enough hours without sleeping and get enough sleep deprivation, you'll see shadow people. It's you know, you're hallucinating, but you also know that what you're seeing is something you shouldn't be seeing because of the sleep deprivation, you know. And it happens sometimes.
Can you tell us why you decided to live off grid and what you did when you were doing that?
Well, my life had gotten so crappy after the near-death experience. You know, all my life, just everyone else's career trajectory went up and mine just went down. And I just was like, you know, what is up with me? And it took me years to realize this, but now I realize it in retrospect. I was suffering from this kind of shamanic sickness, so to speak, because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do after the NDE. I was trying to jump back in my career. So finally, I just said, you know what? I am done with everything. I'm selling off everything. I'm not gonna buy anything else. When my car dies, it dies. I'm not gonna, you know, no more 401ks. I'm pulling all my money out and just living off of it. When it's gone, it's freaking gone. I'm gonna go to Colorado where I don't know anybody, and I'm gonna just hit the West, and I'm just gonna go experience all these great spiritual sites we have. And I'm gonna go to Roswell. I'm gonna go to all these places and whatever. Well, I got as far as Denver. And then I decided to do this off-grid thing in Denver. So I started there. When I started, I wasn't necessarily committing to do the off-grid. That kind of came later. But one thing led to another, and I just said, I'm going to live 2 years with just nothing. I'm not going to be in society. I'm not going to have an Instagram account. You know, I'm not going to do anything. My Facebook's going to go dormant. No one's going to know where I am. Only 2 people and their significant others knew where I was for the entire 2 years. I disappeared. So, yeah, I did that so I could figure out who I was supposed to be and why am I still here, and why my life had gotten to be so crappy. And I figured all those things out, and it took me 2 years to do it, but I did. And I got another book out of it. So now there's 2 books.
That's great. Did you feel like the other side is just as real as here, or more real, and this side is the dream?
This side is the dream, and that side is more real because everything is more intense, more vivid, more brighter, more colorful, more loving, more everything is just to the 10th freaking degree. So yeah, it makes this seem kind of almost, I wouldn't say black and white, but a little sepia, just kind of a little flat toned compared to there.
Did you happen to see any family members on the other side, or at least feel them?
I didn't. I felt that some of the people around me were family members, but I also felt that they were playing different roles at this particular time, and that some of these were friends and some of them were family, but I couldn't really tell who was who. Did you see the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams?
Yes.
Great film. Okay, you know how he's seeing all these people in his crossover life, but they look different because they were playing different roles, and it's that I didn't see anybody's face, but I just felt their auras, and I knew some were friends, some were family, some were friends in this life, some were family that had crossed over in front of me because both my parents died when I was kind of young. So I feel like it was, I feel like my mom was there for sure. But like I said, there was no reason for them to show me specifically who they were. And they told me that the reason for that is because if we show you exactly specifically who we are right now at this moment to you, you will want us to always look like you'll have a preconceived notion of what we're supposed to look like. See, a lot of this stuff was done, I think, to teach me what do we look like? I want to see what you look like. What would you have us to look like? Because we can look like anything you want us to look like. So, well, you're supposed to look like my mom looked. When your mom was young, when your mom passed away, what your mom looks like now. You know what I'm saying? All of that, and then some.
Did you get a sense that your complete or your higher self is there on the other side, and when you come here, you're a limited version of yourself?
Yes, it's a very good analogy. Yeah, it's a very good analogy. It's like your little mini-me of yourself. And that's what we spend so much time in meditation and in soul searching and things like that, is to try to make that connection as strong as it possibly can be. And doing things like changing your diet and things like that, those are all things that help kind of zero in on that. But yeah, you're constantly trying to reach to become that perfect, that part of you that is Christ. Because over there, that is exactly what you are.
Could you go as far as saying that, like, what is here is kind of like a digital copy, and then when we go back, we just upload all our experiences back into the original?
Sure, it's a lot like that. The Akashic Records is something like that. My friend Bill Foster wrote a book about that. Yeah, it's like it's like I said, everything that you're doing is a timestamp memory that someone will look at this memory. Yeah, so it's good for something. If nothing else, we're glorified Google cars riding around, just taking pictures of everything. If you want to look at it that way, that's really what we are. We're just experiencing it, and we're experiencing it from all these different facets and all these angles. But when you assemble it together, imagine if you were just suddenly could just blink your eye and suddenly you could see out of everybody's eyes right now. What an amazing assemblage of the view of the world you would have. See, so this things like that are just mind-boggling. You know what I'm saying? And there are things. There's so many concepts that I can understand that make sense. Like I can listen to these physicists and things on NASA TV talk about stuff and understand what they're talking about. But I can't say it myself because I don't have the knowledge of that. I don't understand physics and stuff, but I can grasp. I do sense that, like I said, we are very close to being on the cusp of changing things radically with what we're about to just discover with gravity. And so this idea of propelling ourselves into other dimensions is going to be feasible stuff. The next 20, 25 years.
A lot of people talk about the ascension coming. Is that what you're referring to?
That's part of it. I believe that is a part of it. Because I think that's going to make it mechanically possible. Once it's mechanically possible to go millions of light years away, then people are going to be more apt to think that there might be something out there. Right now it's just kind of like, well, and our own religions hold us back from that. Our own religions want us to think that there's nothing else out there, because if there is something else out there, then what happens to religion? See, spirituality and religion, those are two different things. And of course, this is not that kind of the show. but you know, it's when you have that in your mind, you're thinking that it has to be one way. And in a relative world, it does. It has to be this or that. But in that full on everything, you know, doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be everything. So that's a hard thing to get people to understand. It's hard to wrap your head around that. That and the no time. The fact that there's no time. People are like, oh, I understand that. No time. No, you don't. You're thinking forever after, forever, happily forever after, eternity. No, that's a timeline that goes on forever. That's vampires. You know what I'm saying? No time, meaning that everything that's ever happened is going to happen, is happening right now, which means you can experience it.
It sounds like you're saying that we're going to be able to do space travel pretty soon. So, did you happen to ask about aliens?
I think so. Yes, and absolutely they're there, and absolutely they are watching, and absolutely they're concerned. You know, you notice that they show up whenever there's I mean, you notice they show up around Roswell when there was, you know, a lot of nuclear things being, you know, so yeah, it doesn't. And the thing is, it wasn't even like I had to ask the question. It was like, are you really going to throw this at us? You know, no. The thing is, I believed in that before, though. You know, saying it's like the things that I already kind of believed in. I didn't really feel like I had to say, prove to me that they're UFOs, you know, because if I could prove, you know, if I can just sit here and look at my corpse laying on the ground, and if that's possible, then the alien thing, I can buy that all day long. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you go over there with no preconceived notion of what you want to learn. But me, I was just like this kid. I wanted to know everything because I felt like the more practical knowledge I had that I could give to people, the better off they would feel. I can't just, oh, it's a magical thing and it's great and you'll love it and da, da, da. Just promise me you'll be happy when you go. That's what religion tells you. You know what I'm saying? It's just trying to give you a description of what the afterlife may be like, you know. So it's tough when you actually get a chance to glimpse it and you're like, wow, there's no putting this in words. And people are like, why did you get to go? Not me. I don't know. If I do go back, that's what I'm going to ask the next time, which I did. I asked that, why me? And their answer was, why not?
Do you have the sense that you can't bring back all the information or all the answers because it would just make your brain explode here? It's too much.
And I think that's why I get the download. It's too much. Yeah. You know, had I grown up in a background in science, maybe that would have given me a better, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, I get the feeling that it's way too much for one person because I didn't remember a lot of this stuff all at once. It wasn't like I came back from that near-death experience and woke up in an ambulance and it's like, hey, I got all the answers to the, you know, everything. Some of it came back slowly. I had a bit of amnesia for a while, you know. I didn't even think I died. I didn't even think I passed out. I thought I fell. I literally thought I fell and knocked the wind out of me. I didn't even know I'd lost consciousness. And they're like, you're out cold, you know, what are you talking about? Oh, no. I didn't even know I had done that. So it took a while for me to assemble all the pieces, and I'm still assembling them 25 years later, you know.
What do you think inspires you about your NDE?
Wow. All of it, just that it is, you know what? I was so disheartened with organized religion and how it seemed to have fallen short for so many societies, you know, not just in the United States, but you see organized religions, different types in different countries, and how it had fallen short. And I was so disappointed in that. And to the point where I was like, well, if there is something after this, it better be darn good. And then when I go and I see that, it was such a relief. So it's like I have this outpouring of everything is okay. There's okayness to everything. There's no need for me to come across your border and take over your whatever in order to put my religious stamp of approval onto your lifestyle in order to save you from something. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no reason to create Christian crusades where I'm going to go kill you in order to save you from yourself. You know, there's no need for any of that. There's no need for that in religion. There's no need for that superiority. So when that got taken out of the religious context, and I realized that that was so much more man-made, then it gave me much more sense of peace, because then you can realize that so much of that was so much of what we have put into those ancient texts, or what we believe how a ruler would think. And we think of those rulers as civil rulers, I'm saying, our Neros of the world and our Caesars of the world. So the way we write about things like, God and Jesus, they tend to have this civil kind of a thing, because those were the rock stars of our day, the rulers.
Why are there so many terrible things allowed to happen here? Did you ask that? And if you did, what was the answer you got?
Oh yeah. They don't have to happen, but they do. And if we want to blame anybody for them happening, we only have ourselves to blame, because the collective consciousness of us all is what really runs the world. There is no mediator to come in and say, I'm going to save this from that, or whatever, so to speak. God doesn't run the world on a day-to-day basis, put it that way. We do, as the collective consciousness. So if there's an earthquake, if there is a tsunami, if there's a civil war, the collective consciousness can change anything it wants to in just a moment's notice, as long as it decides to. The word decide, it means to cut off from. So if we want to say, well, why are these terrible things happening? We're letting them happen. Okay, we're running it. We want to blame this other God. Why does God let bad things happen to good people? God's not letting anything happen. He's not running the world. You're running the world. It's just the way we've literally put it in our brains, because we really want someone else to be responsible for our religion, so that we don't really have to do that kind of soul searching, because it's painful, So we want our religionists to tell us what to do with religion, just like we want our lawyers to tell us what to do about our taxes, and we want our dry cleaners to tell us what to do about that stain we can't get out. So we go to the experts, the religious people, because that's just, we feel like, well, I hired the expert. So that's the thing. We don't want to do that soul searching on ourselves, and until we're ready to do that, we're not going to change a thing.
Rod, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you up for that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They can reach me at just my email address, which is just Rod, my name, Rod, at rodhoneycutt.com.
Is that where people can find out more about your books?
Well, I'm still just in the writing stages right now. It's just, I just took down the old website. See, I'm just now getting around to being the person I'm supposed to be. So I just took down the old Rod Honeycutt media consultant, record producer website. And the coming soon website is the Rod Honeycutt spiritual book writing dude. Coming soon. So yeah, they can, there'll be information forthcoming pretty soon about both the books.
All right. So I guess what you're saying is they're not finished yet.
They're not finished yet. No, absolutely not. I'm still in with the NDE book. I'm still getting, we're just going through the legal stuff with that right now. So getting all the rights clearances to get everybody's names used, because there's some pretty high visibility names, and it's a cool story, but we got to get that cleared up before we can put that out. And the other one is just, I'm still drafting it. Writing songs are easy, man. I can knock those out in a couple of days, but writing a whole book is hard.
All right. Well, before we finish up, can you give us one last positive message?
We are all one. Everything is going to be okay. And it's a fun ride. Enjoy it.
Thank you for that message. And Rod, thank you for being my guest.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Had a blast.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.